So the big question is why? Why do we have this massive economic growth in the 1950s in the United States? The biggest reason is government spending. Government spending. Put all of this into context that we're coming out of the Great Depression. We're coming out of this time of challenging times for sure of the war, and we're developing into this new consumer era. But the government is going to spend more money than it ever has before. Between 1950 and 1970, the number of people holding government jobs in the United States doubles, where before very few people worked for the federal government, starting a little bit in the New Deal era and then growing during World War II, and then literally from 1950 to 1970 doubling. And that's again because of the Cold War, because we're spending all this money to fight against communism across the world, this growth of what they call the military industrial complex. So you also, in addition to having people working for the federal government directly, you also have people working for companies like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and different companies like that that are feeding that military industrial complex, that complementary partnership between the military and industry. That's the military industrial complex, right? Those industries that support the military. And people are making a lot of money and becoming a big part of this. So to give you an example of our defense budget and the changes over time, and again, this kind of goes to the point of the power of the Cold War. Our defense budget in 1950 was $13 billion. So in 1950, it was $13 billion. By 1961, it was $47 billion. $47 billion. That was literally half the federal budget and 10% of the GNP, right? So half of our federal budget in 1961. And I would point out, this is before Vietnam, right? This is before the United States is heavily into Vietnam. We're giving some aid and involved a little bit, but we're not massively in Vietnam. So half of our federal budget was military in 1961, and again, this is because of the Cold War and the preparation for it, and all those efforts. Right? So this was a huge part of it. Right? One other aspect of government spending is going to be the highway system. Do any of you like to go on road trips? I know I love road trips. Right? Give me a car with a lot of gas, and I'm just going to go and see the country. And while it's fun sometimes to go on those back roads and highways and all the stop and goes, sometimes it's fun to just go. And those interstates that we all love, 35E, all of them, they are built in the 1950s. If any of you have seen that Pixar film Cars, right? That's what's being portrayed there, right? The little town gets bypassed when the interstate comes through and starts dying off, which happens across the country, of course. The interstate highway system, if you ever see, you're driving along an interstate and you see a blue sign, it's blue usually with 5 gold stars, that indicates it was part of the original interstate highway system of the country, built in the 1950s. They call it the Eisenhower highway system because President Eisenhower had been general during World War II, and so that's why the 5 stars are on that sign. So there's your trivia of the day. But this idea of let's build highways so that we can get across the country quickly, much of it was the language that was wrapped around this funding of the interstate highway system, which, beginning in the mid-1950s, the United States spends something like $25 billion over a 10-year effort to build over 40,000 miles, interstate miles. But the United States couches it in terms of both this will be good for the economy and the American people and things like that. But the name of the act that is going to do much of the funding should show you what the purpose of it was. It's called the National Interstate and Defense Highway Act. This expands Congress's authorization. They're going to build over 40,000 miles. And this is 1956. So the reality of these interstates and is that it was a Cold War measure, right? You want to have easy ways to connect your military bases, to connect your military troops. They were made wide enough so that an aircraft could land on them if the airports were bombed out or destroyed. And the idea is a commercial plane could land on it too if they had trouble, but it was military. It was, how are we going to most easily get troops from point A to point B? We need this good interstate system to be able to move across the country. And if you look at the way the interstates are laid out, you can see it, right? So that government spending was a huge part of the consumerism and the growth of the American economy in this time period. And we'll skip to the next video for another very important reason why the economy was so booming in the 1950s.